Thanks for tuning in. You're listening to the Embrace Mental Health podcast,
where we embrace a not-so-clinical approach
to conversations surrounding all things mental health. Hello, and welcome to the Embrace Mental Health podcast. I'm your host, Kelsey, and today I have my co-host, Autumn, with me. Hey, Autumn, how's it going?
I'm so tired and cold, but I'm happy to be here.
For those of you who are listening, we are recording this on the Snowmageddon day in January, where we got, I don't know, I feel like they were predicting a lot more snow than we actually got, but regardless, I think all of us were like, we are just hibernating for the next 2 days. And so whether there's a ton of snow or not, I'm not leaving my house. And so anyways,
Exactly.
that's what this day is for us. But
yes.
So today's episode is another tips for loved ones, but we had talked about our very first one that was characteristics of safe people. We talked about how we ended up filling a whole episode with just the first, what we thought was going to be the first half of that, and that we were going to save the second half. So here's the second half for you. So today is going to be the flip side of that. It's going to be characteristics of people who are unsafe people, or maybe not to phrase it quite so categorically of like you're a safe person or you're an unsafe, but some traits or characteristics that are going to not be productive or helpful for the people in your life who struggle with their mental health. Maybe we'll phrase it that way, but yes. Of course, we always have our introductory question first. And so we've already had a Disney question. So Autumn came up with this question, I think, to balance this out a little bit. So Autumn, I'm going to let you take it from here.
For sure. So as I said in the previous episode where we talked about safe characteristics, I grew up a Nickelodeon kid hardcore. And so the question for today is pertaining to Fairly Odd Parents. And the question is, in a Fairly Odd Parents type of situation, what is something you would wish for that would get your fairy godparents taken away from you? So I had an immediate answer to this. And then I reflected and I was like, oh, maybe there's something more altruistic I could come up with. But the first thing that came to mind was to not ever have to pay taxes again. There was a rule about stealing in what is called the rules in Fairly Odd Parents. And you cannot wish for things that include stealing, and not paying for taxes is definitely some form of stealing, I guess. I still don't understand it all, but yeah, they would definitely snatch away my Fairly Odd Parents very quickly.
Oh, yeah. So Autumn brought up and briefly went through the rules for me. I was a Nickelodeon kid too. Fairly Odd Parents was a little bit more when I was like probably early high school, but I watched my share of Fairly Odd Parents. That and Jimmy Neutron was a hilarious one too. Those two were like so funny. I'm also just have to throw my Nickelodeon fandom out there. I'm a huge SpongeBob fan, which makes some people, yes. Some people like lose respect for me, and I'm like, then you haven't watched it. It's so clever and it's so well written, especially the first like 3-4 seasons is just like gold. It's so funny. But
especially when you're an adult and you rewatch and you're like, no way, this is actually amazing.
Yes, it's so funny. I seriously, I probably quote SpongeBob daily, and it's just always sad to me the number of people that don't understand my references. But true story, I've got my basketball girls referring to missed layups as dead SpongeBobs because of a particular scene in SpongeBob where he just like gets consumed and blows up with anger. And so that's what I say. When we miss layups, that's what I do internally. And so they're like, oh no, it's a dead SpongeBob. So that's how deep my fandom goes. Yeah. But anyway, so she kind of went through the rule book, and after listening to it, I think probably the one that I would be the most likely to like get tripped up with or just be insistent on. There's something about you, I don't know, maybe I could slip this one in and it would be okay. I don't remember this specifically being in the rules, but we'll see. It says something about you can't wish people back from the dead. But I think my wish would be that I realize now I probably should wish this for like all the loved ones in my life, but specifically,
We're about to know who Kelsey's favorites are.
Specifically, it would be my dog that I would wish would never die. But
I love it. I definitely, hands down, thought you were going to say your parent. And I was be like, yeah, well, Corey, that makes sense. The dog, I love it.
Yeah. So, yep. I would save the dog. Oh my word.
There's something about that feels like it's against the rules. So yeah, Jordan Monstring will definitely come to you and be like, you're done, Kels, give me your fairly godparent.
Yep. So,
oopsie.
Yes.
That's so cute.
Oh yes.
Wow, I love how sweet yours was, and mine was crime.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm sure they'd find some way that it wouldn't be as sweet, like anyway, but
for sure.
Too morbid here, but yeah. All right. So, just like we had 11 characteristics of safe people, we have a nice round even number of 11 characteristics of unsafe people too. So, yeah, like I kind of mentioned before, this isn't so much, we don't want you to go and like make a list of everybody in your life and have to say, okay, this is naughty or nice list, this is safe or unsafe list. But this is more so for people who have people in their lives who are struggling with their mental health to be like, oh, okay, I don't always know how to be helpful. This is a list of things to help me understand, okay, these things would actually not be helpful. And so, yeah, these are the kinds of things that could potentially make somebody feel like you are an unsafe person to go to with their mental health struggles. And we've talked about how important it is for people to have multiple people in their life who they feel comfortable and safe going to within their struggles. And so that's what this list is intended for. But yeah. All right. So I'll go first. The first characteristic that we have is somebody who uses guilt or blame or shame. I just don't think I can stress this enough. Those are never going to be constructive approaches to anything. Anytime that you are trying to guilt somebody into action, it's not going to go well. Anytime that you're trying to find somebody to blame for every single thing, it's not going to be helpful. And shame absolutely is just never going to be a constructive force in anybody's life. And there's unfortunately, I think, a lot of this around mental health. I think there's a lot of people who, rather than wanting to grapple with the complexity of mental health, with the depth of mental health, with the struggle of it, it's just easier to say, well, they're just lazy, or they're just not trying, or they're just, whatever it is. And it's just never going to help somebody get to a place of health. And that's what our goal is, right? Like that's what our goal should be for all the people in our life, is that they can become healthier and better and just better feeling people. And so guilt and shame and blame, those approaches are just never going to help somebody get to that place.
Yeah. And I think if you are a kind of person who, is skeptical, or maybe not even skeptical, but you find yourself being this type of person, and maybe you don't approach someone with mental health with the empathy that you should, I would encourage you to just think about, I've heard this example a million times, and I may have even said it in previous episodes. But like if someone has a broken leg, you are not going to guilt them for not running a race. Let's say they broke their leg by, I don't know, they got hit by a car. Hopefully that's not too gruesome. Hopefully
Mean Girls just came out. Like, well, we can reference it to that. Yeah.
What'd you say? Mean Girls.
The new Mean Girls movie just came out, so we're just being culturally relevant. Yeah.
Yes. Let's say we're in a Mean Girl situation, and you're Regina George, and you got hit by a bus. You're not going to guilt someone into, you're not going to put guilt on someone for not being able to run a race because they have broken legs. You're not going to blame them for getting hit by a bus. Although it's kind of depending on how you view the movie. Regina George had it coming, but whatever. And you're not going to shame them for not being able to do the things that they cannot. I will repeat, cannot. Not does not want to, not isn't unwilling or undesiring to. They cannot do. Why? Because you would be perceived as such a uh, person who was out of touch with reality if you had all of these expectations for someone who is physically incapable of doing things that you think that they should be able to. And it's the same thing when it comes to mental health. It's just invisible, so you can't see it. So just try to keep that in mind.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we talked about in our previous episode too, the other thing is that like people who are struggling with their mental health, they have enough guilt, blame, and shame that they are putting on themselves. I promise you, nobody is going to be a harsher critic to somebody with mental health than that person themselves. That is one of the hardest things to fight through when you are in that place, is fighting through your own guilt, your own blame, your own shame. And so you absolutely do not need somebody else piling more of it on you. It's just not a helpful, never going to be a helpful approach. So if you are, looking at what you're doing and there's even a hint of it, figure out a different way, because it's just never going to be a constructive use of anybody's time. So
absolutely. So the second one on our list is disappearing or withdrawing. Yeah, don't ghost people in general, but especially your mentally ill friends. Don't ghost them. They're going through it already.
oh, yeah.
You know, there is already a level of isolation that comes with struggling with your mental health. Part of that is a self-isolation that, someone who's struggling with their mental health naturally withdraws from other people because it's very difficult to uh, remain high functioning and present as are used to when you are in a darker space. And then there's another part of it where there are just certain parts of like mental illness that are not socially acceptable. And so, to put it very bluntly, there people just like they don't want you around all the time because you're not fun to have around or things like that. And so being someone who is the opposite of that, who is consistent in how you show up, you allow someone to just be how they need to be. Yeah, you're there, you're present. It's just so important. It's very counter to what the person feels like they deserve. There is a feeling of unworthiness. And so for you to stay when they believe that they aren't worthy of people's attention or love or intention is just amazing. And I will say, if you find yourself needing to take a step back for whatever reason, this is not me telling you not to do that. I am a big fan of direct communication. It's something that I've grown in a lot over the last few years. Tell them, talk to them. It is so much nicer to have someone say, hey, I need to take a step back for my own reasons right now. I don't have the capacity and I need to, XYZ for myself, than for someone to just disappear and you never know why.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great point. I think, like Autumn said, if you are in a space where you can just be present with somebody, then it's just when you're in that mental health crisis state, or just even just a lower mental state of what you are normally operating at, that's a time when the people in your life, they need you to actually pursue that relationship, or they need you to kind of be the one who's initiating a lot of that, because like she said, it's an automatic thing to withdraw. And so if that person in your life withdraws and you're also withdrawing, then that's just a lot of isolation. And isolation, like I want to be careful, because I also, like, there are legitimate times too, where the people in your life who are going through it, they do need like maybe a little bit of time, and they might
Yeah.
need some personal space from time to time. But you also don't want them to just be completely isolated 100%, because that is not healthy either. So I'm not saying like if the person is like, hey, I just need a night off tonight and I just need a night to kind of chill and be by myself. Okay, that's like, believe them. That's okay. But if you realize somebody has withdrawn for a couple of weeks now and that kind of thing, that's when, you don't want to withdraw. You want to, even if you're just communicating, hey, I haven't talked to you in a couple of weeks. Are you okay? Is there anything I can be doing? Or something like that, versus like that isolation can be a really dangerous place for a person to be. So, but again, if you have your own kind of struggle going on, like Autumn said, that is okay. Boundaries are very important within every relationship. And so if you need to take a step back, that's cool. But like she said, just be direct about it and not making that person wonder. And I would also say, hey, I'm having a hard time myself right now, so I need to take a couple steps back just to get my health back in order, rather than you're draining me, and so I need to stay.
Yes.
Like, don't do that. Like,
Mhm.
it's about you, which is fine. Like, it's much better to say, hey, I need to take a step back because I need to work on my mental health a little bit, rather than you're exhausting me and I can't be around you for a couple of weeks. Like, that's not going to be very kind. So,
Yeah. I think something additional with this, I feel like I gas her up in a lot of episodes. My friend Betsy, she's just a freaking rock star. My natural inclination is to like heavily withdraw. I also mentioned like a few episodes ago that I am an introvert, like a major introvert, and so I am like isolative. But when my mental health is bad, I can easily go weeks and weeks without seeing a single person. And I remember it was in like the last couple of months. I reached out in like a group chat that I have with some of my female friends, and I was just like, hey, like I'm not doing well, I need prayer. And then like 4 or 5 days later, it was the same thing. I was like, I'm not doing great. And for me to even do that, it shows that like something's really up. And so after, my friend Betsy reached out multiple times and was just like, hey, I'm just checking in on you. What can I do for you? How can I help you? All these different things. And after about a week and a half, she texted me and she was like, I'm coming over today. You don't have to talk to me. You don't have to acknowledge me. I am going to sit on your couch with my iPad and do my own thing and just be there. And when I tell you, it was just what I needed. And I'm not telling people to like go and do this and like cross people's boundaries if they say they don't want people, but like there's just those people in your life I hope that you have where they know that you don't know how to ask for help. And while you're in the process of growing to ask for help, they are willing to say, no, I'm going to step in because this is getting to a point where it's not healthy for you. So, yay, Betsy, we love her.
way to go, Betsy. That's awesome. That's like perfect example. All right, so that moves us on to number 3, and the number 3 is characteristic of somebody who's unsafe. It's somebody who is making assumptions about character or effort. And in some ways, this kind of coincides with number 1 a little bit, where assumptions are also going to be just about as helpful as shame and blame, right? Like there's a certain saying about assumptions, and it's pretty dang true. But I think it's hard for people on the outside of it to not look and say, well, they're just sitting around not doing anything. They're not trying to proactively approach that. And it's just, I can't say it's never true, but at the same time, mental health is not the prize that you get for trying 100%, 100% of the time. It's not like it's something that you earn. It's all about progress, and there's highs and lows, and there's times where you're going to make progress, and then a couple of months you might be like, oh, I've taken a couple steps back. That's the reality of this journey. And so, and Autumn kind of touched on this before too, but we promise you 99% of people who are struggling with their mental health, they want to be the things that you want them to be as well. They want to be doing the things that you think they should be doing as well. And so this isn't about effort. This isn't about character. It is about illness. And the reason they're not doing these things isn't because they're not trying or because they don't want it bad enough or because they're not willing to put in enough effort or bootstrap mentality phrase here. But it's because it's an illness and it's complex. It's hard to figure out and it's exhausting to try to figure out. And so sometimes 100% effort looks like just trying to stay where you are.
Yeah.
And there are going to be times, it fluctuates where you're going to, like I've had seasons where it just was hard and I had my 100% effort was just trying to maintain where I was at. Then, further down the line, I found a little bit more strength. So then I was able to put a little bit more effort towards progression. But it's just not like, it does not have to do with character or effort. It has to do with illness. And so, keeping that in mind and not just assuming that if people aren't making progress as quickly as you wish they were, or it looks to you like they're not trying, there's so much going on underneath the surface that you can't see. So don't make those assumptions because, again, they're just not helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd even add on, if we're going back to we're really going to milk this broken leg example. Mental health and physical health often get compared in a very helpful way to help people understand how real it is. But I would even go as far to say mental health is in its own category because not only are you sick, but the thing that you need to get better is the thing that is sick, right? So if you have a broken leg, like you can look up the things online that you need to be do to elevate your leg and all these different things. When it comes to mental health, the thing that you need in order to get healthy is your mind. And the mind is the thing that is sick. And so the process is so much slower and it's so much more difficult, in my personal opinion. And I think, I don't know, just when it comes to making assumptions, please don't do it. It's not, I, here is my one piece of practical advice for this one. Ask questions.
Yes.
Before you assume you know anything, ask questions because you are not the knower of all things. You do not know that person better than they know themselves. And I can guarantee you there are things swirling around in their mind, things going on in their lives that you have no idea about. So just ask questions. Just don't talk. Don't think too hard about it. Ask questions and let them speak. And you'll watch yourself be proven wrong in the best way possible.
Yep. 100%.
So that brings us to number 4, being dishonest. And there's a few different ways that you could, probably break down this characteristic. But the first thing that came to mind for me was gaslighting. And I think that this ties in a little bit with one before for making assumptions about character and effort, where if you are assuming that I am actually better off than I'm quote unquote, maybe not pretending, but projecting to be or appearing to be. Or if you think that I'm not putting in as much effort as I'm capable of doing, telling me something that's not true about myself when I am already in such a vulnerable state and believe so many false things about myself already can be really, really damaging. And I think this one's kind of unique because if you're making assumptions, you think that you're correct, so you're not aware that you're being dishonest. But I think that goes back to what I said before about not making assumptions and asking questions. But I think another way to think about being dishonest as well is trying to protect the people in your life that have mental health struggles or have some sort of mental illness, protecting them from the bad or sad things that they're experiencing or that are going on in life by not telling them what's going on or by sugarcoating things. It's not going to help anyone. I do think that there is a level of wisdom in the approach that you take, or the execution, the delivery of how you give things, if things are just not going great in life while someone is also going through a mental health crisis. um, but to just flat out tell someone that something's not going on, or to overly sugarcoat it to make it seem like it is insignificant when it's actually significant, um, it just reinforces this lie of weakness, right? That I am too weak, and the people around me can see how weak I am, that they don't even want to have me experience reality. Um, and that just doesn't feel good. That doesn't feel good at all when the people around you essentially want you to be out of touch of reality because they think you are too weak to handle it.
Yeah. How I've kind of seen this one play out in my life some is, I think a lot of times this comes from good intentions. Not always, but like there I can think of times where I had loved ones or who were close to me during a time of crisis, and they knew something was going on. And I would ask, "Hey, is this thing going on?" And they said, "No, no, no, it's okay. Everything's okay." Well, that didn't actually change the fact that that thing was going on. And so then all of a sudden, okay, so I'm like, okay, they say this thing is not going on. It's not going on. And then that thing happens. And all of a sudden I was like, okay, so now not only am I having to deal with this thing, but I got blindsided by it. And I hate being blindsided. That's one of the things that I struggle with a lot in my life, and having fear of being blindsided by things. And so now not only is this thing true, even though I was living in a space where I thought it wasn't true, but I've been blindsided by it, and I'm just in a real rough spot. And the people in my life, they did that because they were trying to quote unquote protect me, but it really didn't protect me from anything. And then on top of that, the next time that I ask you, "Hey, is everything okay?" and you say, "Yeah, everything's okay," I don't believe you. I don't. So then I never feel safe. I never feel comfortable that what you're telling me is the truth.
Mm.
And then you get in this real difficult space where it's just like everything is falling apart and I have no way of knowing because nobody will be truthful with me. And that is it's just not helpful. And even though you're trying to be helpful to that person by quote unquote protecting them, you can't protect them from life. And
Yeah.
so, um, and then they don't feel like they can trust you when you are saying things are okay. And so, dishonesty breaks trust is, what the moral of the story here is. And when you're in that mental health place, you need to have people who you can trust to be truthful with you. I will say there might be some exceptions to this, but I would say the only time that this is an exception is if the person the person in your life has specifically told you, "Do not tell me this thing." For instance, I can see like if you're in a workplace and people are critical of you, and you're like, "Okay, I don't need to know every single time somebody says something critical about me." That's fine. Like if they give you a specific, like, "Hey, don't tell me if this is happening," then that's another way of, being trustworthy, is by doing what you say you will do and being, honest within that. But for the most part, when you think you're protecting people by omitting the truth or just straight up lying to them, it's actually really can be really detrimental, because then not only might they get blindsided by something, but then they aren't going to trust you when you do say things are okay, and they are okay. So yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Number 5 is somebody who has a pass fail mentality. And I've seen this sometimes where it's like, okay, well, you want to be well. And so to be well, you need to do A, B, and C. And then that person is trying to do A, B, and C, but let's say they slip up on B. Like if you're depressed and you're like, okay, every day you need to
Mm.
get up out of bed, brush your teeth, and write in your journal, just picking random things. And it's like, oh, okay, day 3, I didn't write in my journal. Well, you're not even trying then. You failed, and that is just, it's not helpful, because first of all, it tags on that shame piece to it.
Yeah.
And so then not only is that person like, well, dang it, I didn't do the thing that I wanted to do, but now I'm feeling ashamed of it because I failed at my efforts. And that just can be a slippery slope into a not good mentality towards your mental health. it is a process. And so I think the most helpful thing is to focus on progress, not on passing or failing.
Yeah.
And like we've said, progress isn't linear all the time. It's a lot of times 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 4 steps back. But ultimately, we want to celebrate progress. And is it always going to be a perfect line up? Of course not. No journey is. There's going to be times where you don't do the things that you are intending to do to pursue your mental health. But that doesn't mean that you're failing. It doesn't mean that you can't still get to where you want to go. And so just that pass fail mentality can be a dangerous place to go with people. I think sometimes we're like, well, if we just make it really black and white and it's this check mark, then they'll have a simple thing to follow and then they'll get there. And it's just not that simple.
Yep. It really isn't. My encouragement to anyone for this one would be to be the kind of person who celebrates the little victories. Oh my gosh, it's just beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful. As opposed to critiquing. And I will say this, if you have, like someone who you perceive as like really difficult in your life and it just seems like they're not really doing anything, and they're struggling with their mental health and they're not doing anything about it. If that person is alive, there is a little victory for you to celebrate that day. You celebrate the fact that they woke up that morning and you tell them that. I said this in a previous episode about when I was in the psychiatric hospital, how we had to set one goal every morning in big group. And then at the end in big group, we would share if we were able to like complete our goal. And it would be something so small, like I'm going to eat 3 meals today. I'm going to go to all of the groups today, or I'm going to or just talk to someone who's new. And what it would do is it would show you that you are capable of doing things. It's super small in like the grand scheme of things. Me eating all 3 of my meals at the psychiatric hospital is not world changing, right? I'm not out here changing the world. But it was just this thing to me of like, whoa, like I am capable of doing this. So when you go to that person and you tell them like, I don't know if you realize this, but it's actually so strong of you that you chose to wake up and get out of bed this morning. Like life changing, y'all. So celebrate those victories. Celebrate the progress that those people are making.
Mm-hmm. Celebration is always going to get you farther than critiques are going to.
I'm going to put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
I love that.
I can't wait.
So yeah, that brings us to number 6. One of my biggest pet peeves: makes everything about them. Oh goodness.
TED Talk
Okay.
coming. Here we go.
Yeah. Please. I'm begging you. Just don't talk. If you are one of those people where you really struggle to make everything about yourself, while you are in the area of growing out of that, because I hope you're pursuing growth in that, just don't talk. Ask questions. Ask questions. That is going to be the best thing in helping you not talk about yourself so much. Because in the nicest way possible, it's not about you. Not everything is about you. In this situation with this person who is struggling, it is about them. It is about their well-being. It is about their safety. Your own personal experiences is when you are in a space talking about your own experiences. But if you're with someone who is struggling and the point of that interaction is to support them. And I think one of the reasons why I feel so strongly about this is because so many of the people in my life who struggle with mental illness, and I feel like there's probably some sort of psychology behind this. They're naturally like empathetic people. We're more sensitive to like the energy and the people around us. And also maybe there's a bit of like caregiver role that they maybe experienced when they were younger. And so the like point of all of this is, if you start talking about your own stuff, there's a very solid chance that the person who is struggling that you're talking to is going to become your quote unquote therapist. They're going to start taking care of you in that moment. And that's the exact opposite of what we're trying to do. That person has probably spent a good chunk of their life and a good chunk of their relationships playing that exact role. They don't need to be doing that right then and there. And so if they say something that you resonate with, don't feel obligated to be like, "Oh my goodness, yeah, me too. I feel that way and I was feeling this way yesterday and so what I did was this and I don't really know if it helped me, but blah 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 blah." You know, or, "Well, this is the thing that you need to do because this is what helped me, and this is the way that I think about things and blah 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 blah." The golden thing that you can do is just ask questions and validate people's experiences. That's it. No one is asking you to solve their problems. No one is asking, like, leave that to the therapist, right? Leave all of the other stuff to the therapist. Just show up, be present, ask questions, and validate.
Yep.
I'm going to put that one on a t-shirt too.
Yes.
Oh man.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Yeah. I feel like I can hear people saying, but it's affecting me. And so like you're like, okay, well, like when I'm talking to somebody and they're telling, like, as I've heard of people who are like, well, okay, but let me explain to you how your mental health affects me. No, 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 no. Because first of all, okay, that could be true. Yes, there is a challenge of being in any sort of relationship with somebody who has a mental health issue. They're not the ones who need to be your therapist for that. And so while, yeah, that might be true that it is affecting you, deal with that outside. I mean, that is one of the biggest things that I think I have for people is they're like, man, I have this relationship that this person is in an unhealthy mental place and it's hard on me. Yeah, of course it is. But get your own support. That is
Yes.
the number one tip that I have for people, frankly, is if you are in a close relationship with somebody who is struggling with their mental health, you also should go to therapy to work through that issue
Yes.
yourself. But what you do not need to do is to put that burden on the person who is having that struggle. I'm not telling you to ignore, I'm not trying to gaslight you and say, well, your issue doesn't matter. Your issue matters too, but you don't bring it up with that person. They're not in charge of that. Like they are trying to get themselves healthy. And you saying, well, let me explain to you how your unhealth is affecting me. That's another burden, and that's shame, that's blame, that's guilt. And that person is not going to need that. You are allowed to have those feelings of, this is difficult for me, but you deal with that outside of that relationship. You find your own safe people to work with that through. So, yeah.
Yes, I will tag on to that. The times that you bring something up to people is when someone is doing something wrong and they need to correct something. Mental illness is not something that they are doing wrong. They are sick. They are
Yep.
sick. They are not doing something wrong. Their brain is just not operating in the way that it is supposed to. And so, if you are being negatively impacted by their mental illness, that's not their fault. That's like going to someone who has
A broken leg. I'm sorry.
cancer.
I'm just kidding.
Would you say?
It's a broken leg.
Yeah. Okay. So that one's better. That's a lot lighter than cancer. Uh, that's like, again, here goes this broken leg example. Going to someone who has a broken leg and telling them all of the ways that their broken leg and their situation is impacting you in a negative way. They cannot do anything about that. If you don't have the capacity to handle someone's season of mental illness, you need to have other people or other resources that are filling your cup. Period.
Period. All right. So, number 7 on this list is somebody who tells you that you can't handle things, either by their words or their actions. Um, while it is important to understand that that person may not be able to do all of the things, you also do not want to be a person who reinforces an idea in their head that they are not strong. You don't want to reinforce to someone's mind, hey, you're weak and you can't handle things. And sometimes that can look, sometimes people might just what you say is projecting that, right? Like I remember, oh, that was one of the worst times of my life, but I was going through some pretty severe grief. And the person said to me, "Well, are you even trying to be okay?" And I just like, it was like one of the most, I just didn't even know how to respond to that. I was like,
Mm,
of course I'm trying to be okay. Like, why would I be choosing this? But on top of that, they're basically saying, you're not handling this well.
mm,
And that was just so painful in that time because I was injured. I was going through a loss. And so, of course, I mean, I had reason to be upset, but then for somebody to kind of suggest that I wasn't handling it well
yeah.
is not helpful. And so, just trying to, it's a delicate balance. All of this is a balance because at the same time we don't want you standing there saying, well, you need to be doing all of these things because you're totally fine. But at the same time, you're trying to be supportive, but not in a way that says you're weak and you can't do this.
Mm,
You're wanting to, okay, we're making progress here, but you are capable of finding health. The more that you can help inject that belief into those people, because it's hard to find a lot of times. And so to have people on the outside who are not saying, hey, you can't handle this, but are actually helping you with the opposite and are like, hey, I believe in you. You have what it takes to find what you need to be okay. That's going to be a lot more helpful than, hey, you're obviously very weak right now. And so that's what I'm going to treat you like.
yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna go back to that broken leg example real quick. um
We just need a t-shirt with a broken leg on it too.
well, literally it'll just be an inside joke. If they haven't seen this episode, they'll never understand it.
Yeah.
Um yeah. So from someone who I have never broken my leg, but I broke my arm. And I remember when I got my cast off, my arm, like it didn't feel 100% yet.
Yeah.
it was fine to use. But I think if we lean into this broken leg example, the idea of like using the muscles in a healthy way, right? Not just like getting up and running a marathon, but like using those muscles, using that bone, even when it feels a little uncomfortable, is like the way it is a part of the path of healing. It's
Hmm.
part of the journey. And we're gonna milk this example even more. It's like having someone next to you, like right beside you when you like go to take those first steps after you've gotten your cast off. Like you got someone beside you who is, you can lean on them, take that step, and it hurts a little bit, but like that it's a part of the healing journey. Having people who are willing to like, first they see your strength, they acknowledge that in you, and they wanna like walk towards that with you is really, really beautiful. Yeah. And then also like not only walking towards that with you, but like they're aware that pain is a part of life and it's a part of the journey, and discomfort is a part of life, and burdens are a part of life. And so they don't need to keep all of those things away from you until you're completely healed. Honestly, those are parts of the things that are going to help you heal. Because when you're exposed to them and you don't completely crumble, that's a reminder to yourself, like,
Yes.
oh, I'm not, 4 months ago, that would have taken me out. That would have just, I would be
Hmm.
in bed for years. But now I'm like, I am handling this and responding to this differently than I would have before. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Walking alongside people, even along their baby steps. Like, yes, beautiful.
Yes, absolutely. And that brings us to number 8, hasn't worked through their own issues. Yo, this is I'm realizing if y'all haven't listened to the one previously tip for loved ones on how to be a safe person, this one just feels a lot more spicy for some reason. Like a lot
Yeah.
more like heated and like, a little angsty. Hasn't worked through their own issues. I'm going to add a little caveat to this. Hasn't worked through their own issues and is not aware of that.
Yeah.
everyone has issues, everyone has stuff that they're working through. But if you're the kind of person where you are just convinced in your own brain that you are like healthy and like whole in your journey and all this stuff, and so you come to someone, I can tell when someone hasn't worked through their own issues by the level of confidence and arrogance that they have in the advice that they are
Yep.
giving me in their approach. And I said this, I can't remember which episode. I think it might have been the previous one, but maybe a couple more back. The way that you talk to people is often the way that you talk to yourself. So if you're the kind of person where you are constantly like, sorry, that I don't know if that like sounds strange to the people that can't see on YouTube, but I'm like, I'm doing like the strict hand thing. If you're the kind of person um who is just like always giving advice, always needs to fix things, never leaves space just for emotions, just to like be, I'm pretty confident that you do that to yourself, that you do not give yourself the space and the grace to just be human, to just feel your emotions. Um, if you're the kind of person who consistently invalidates the experiences of other people, just take a look in the mirror and ask yourself, when was the last time I validated how I felt? um, it is, it can be incredibly harmful, though, if we're being serious. It can be so, so harmful for you to project your own gunk and garbage onto someone else. And so, my encouragement to you would be go to therapy.
Be there. Yep. We should like have some sort of fundraiser like every time we say that exact sentence. My advice to you is to go to therapy. We get $1. That would be really, we could
Yes.
fund this thing. Yeah. I could get that PTO we talked about. But
That's fantastic.
but yeah. We are going to have essentially like a whole episode on that particular topic. So I'm not even going to get into that, but be ready. It's going to be the last episode of the season. So look out in May because I have a whole, we talked about Kelsey pet peeve episodes or that, or, that kind of thing. That's going to be one of those episodes for me too, but I'm not going to dive into it because it's going to be a whole episode's worth. So, and Autumn covered it well. So
I just
just a
want to
little
say, for
teaser.
the people that they're not watching, and maybe they don't know Kelsey, I could see Kelsey's nostrils flaring just a little bit when we were going through this. And I know Kelsey, and so I know like when she starts to get like she about to go off or she's like getting heated or passionate about something, that her nostrils flare up just a little bit, and so I can see it, and I was ready for it, but now I guess I gotta wait. So
Gotta wait.
we're all
Yeah.
gonna be waiting for anticipation because whoa.
Yeah. That's hilarious. Yep. All right. Number 9. So, number 9 is somebody who enables or promotes codependence.
Hmm.
And this one, oh boy, is it tricky because I think sometimes people are so worried about enabling people that they
Hmm.
just completely step out totally. They're like, well, I don't want to enable that behavior, so I'm just going to be a jerk about it. I'm going to make this pass fail. I'm going to heap on the guilt and the shame. But that's, there's a balance here, like, right, there's so much balance in life that it's easy to get unbalanced. But I guess this comes from, I've seen sometimes where people are walking alongside somebody who's going through a mental health issue, but rather than just walking alongside and maybe being there for support, they try to be the whole crutch, right?
Yeah.
Like they are almost kind of making this idea of like, you cannot get through this without me. And that is a dangerous place to be for both parties involved, because then not only does that person not learning to walk on their own or develop their own strength, but they are becoming dependent on somebody else. And we always need people in our lives, but we also need to be able to develop that strength on our own as well. But it also puts a lot of burden and pressure on that person who's acting as the crutch, where they're like, well, I can't do anything for myself or anything for my own life because I have to be this crutch for this person.
Mm.
And then the next thing you know, you just kind of have an unhealthy relationship in the midst of all the mental health struggle. And that's
Yeah.
just a really difficult place to be. We talked about this in our last episode about it is so important that you not just have one person in your life who is helping you, but you need a multitude of people, because not everybody can be every single thing that somebody needs.
Yeah.
And you cannot be the only person that somebody needs.
Yeah.
There's got to be a community aspect to this. And it becomes a relationship without any kind of boundaries to it. And so you definitely want to be supportive, but you can't be this person's hero. You can't be this person's magic pill. And so trying to figure out that balance of like, okay, how much are they learning to kind of develop some of that strength within themselves and not have to have me be a part of that? But then also not just saying, well, you're on your own, kid. Like, best of luck to you. Finding that balance of being somebody's support, but not being somebody's crutch.
Yeah. No, that's really, really, really good. And I think another danger of enabling or promoting codependence is you may not even realize how bad it is until you start to feel resentment or bitterness because this person is consistently leaning on you in ways that you have enabled them to. And so I think it's also a very healthy way to not only like help this person and help yourself, but also to protect that relationship that you guys have. Yeah, I think that's important to remember. And I think this is just like the golden thing that I keep coming back to, but a good way to, it's not going to be, the ticket to avoiding this, but a practical way to kind of help you out in this is, again, asking questions, because this keeps you from consistently giving advice. This keeps you from like showing up as the person with all of the answers, with the one who can do all of the things. Asking someone questions, it forces them to look inside and kind of work through things on their own. You are the support. You're not the hero, like Kelsey said. You're
Yeah.
not the one coming in and fixing all of the things. So yeah, and it just kind of forces them to think critically. It forces them to use their brain and work through those things with you alongside them, as opposed to you working through those things for them.
Yeah. I would say too, like if you're a person, you're like, I don't know how to find this balance. And it is a tricky balance. It can be a really difficult balance to find. So here's our tip once again. If you're having a hard time knowing what that balance should look like, see a therapist. Start seeing a therapist and ask them like, hey, is this healthy or is this unhealthy? Should I do this or should I do that? And, somebody who has expertise in this field should be able to help you figure out how to navigate this in a holistically healthy way for both parties that are involved.
Yeah. Okay, so that brings us to number 10, having a superior/inferior approach to the relationship. Power dynamics are really important to remember, especially, they're important to remember always, but especially when someone is in a very vulnerable place. I might even say when they're in a very, what's the word? Not malleable, but what is that stinking word? One moment. When they're in a very,
maybe?
yes. Yeah. Power dynamics are important to keep in mind all the time, but especially when someone is in a vulnerable or impressionable place. Recognizing that you, as the loved one, might be in a healthier place, but it definitely does not make you the knower of all things. And it doesn't make you any better than the person that you are walking alongside or the person that's struggling. If you go into that situation, go into that relationship with a superior mindset, even if you don't like actively say it out loud with so many words, the person that's struggling, they're gonna be able to feel that. They're going to be
Mhm.
able to feel that, and they may not have the strength or the capacity to speak up for themselves. But it's going to impact them. We've talked about, feeling weak, feeling incapable many times in this podcast alone, and going in with like a superior mindset would just feed into that. The idea
Mhm.
of you are less than, you are not worthy, you are incapable, you are weak, yada, yada, yada. All of the things that are so counterproductive to what we want, which is to see them grow and heal and become strong and confident. And so recognize that the way that you approach a relationship really does impact how someone views themselves, and how someone views themselves plays a humongous role in mental health and in mental wellness.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. I think like to give people kind of an idea of what it is you're trying to pursue within being that support role, the word that I would come to is empowerment.
Mm,
You want to help empower the people in your life who are struggling with their mental health to seek wellness. And so you're not trying to fix it for them. You're not trying to impart all of your wisdom and knowledge onto them so that you don't want to see this person as deficient and you are, you don't want to see this person as deficient and see yourself as like, okay, I am the one who's going to fix this. Because
mm,
it doesn't help. And so what you're trying to do is empowerment. You're trying to help that person figure it out for themselves, whether that's by listening and helping them have a place where they can talk through it, where they can kind of sort it out, whether that's just being there so that they're not stuck in that place of isolation, which can be a slippery slope of negativity. All these things you want to help empower the person. And that doesn't mean that you're the one who has the power and they're the one deficient in power. You just want to come alongside them. You want to come at this as like a peer to peer relationship because it's
yeah.
what it is. You're not superior to them. You have something, your life might look a little bit different than theirs, but that doesn't make you better. And so the more that you can understand that that's what you're going for here and not to come in as the superior one in the relationship who can help drag this inferior person along, like that's not going to be helpful. And what Autumn said is just dead on of like, we want to influx confidence and belief and love to people and not this message that you are weak and doing a bad job and are unworthy, you know? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this can be really, this can be a very slippery slope and a touchy game to play, because if you, first of all, if you're going into something thinking that you are superior and like you have all of the answers, you're going to be the one to like, it plays into that, enables or promotes codependence, because you are the, I hope this isn't a trigger word to some people, but like you're going in with that savior complex, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it is, you are the one, and that's it. You are the one. You are
Mm-hmm.
it. You have the answers. You are the thing. And this can become incredibly tricky when you have people who start to slip into suicidal ideation, suicidal behavior, where all of a sudden, if you are viewing yourself as like the person with the answers, the person who is going to fix this person, you have now in your mind decided that their life is in your hands. And that's just not true. It can't be. It cannot be true.
Yeah.
We'll probably do a whole nother episode on this at some point, but like this is why, one of the reasons why it's so important to stay in your lane. Essentially, you are not a therapist. And even if you are, you're not their therapist, because that would
Mm-hmm.
be a conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm.
um, you are a friend. You are a peer. You are a loved one. You are equal to them. You point them to resources. You encourage them. You empower them to be confident and to make their own decisions, because at the end of the day, it really is them and their life. You cannot make the choices for them. And so I just think it's really important to remember you are not the puppet master of
Mhm.
their life, because it can feel fun, I guess, for a minute for the people that really want someone to like take care of and boss around, which you probably need to go to therapy and work through that. But it becomes a whole lot less fun when things become really, really real and
Yeah.
someone is in a mindset of not wanting to be alive anymore. Then you're like, oh my goodness, what do I do? When in reality, we don't want you to get to that place in the first place where you are the person who's now like, okay, well, I've had to have all the answers before. What is the answer that I need to have now? Yeah. So
Yep. Absolutely.
yeah.
All right. That brings us to our last point, which is number 11. And that is somebody who tries to fix or give advice. And I feel like this is reflected in just about all the points that are up above
Yep.
here. But I mean, I think you don't have to be a person who struggles with mental illness to understand how frustrating it is to just need to talk to somebody for a minute and they immediately go into fix it mode. And some of that, I mean, like for people who are like, well, have you tried or why didn't you just, or did it? And it's like, you don't think I've Googled this topic to death at this point? Like, you don't think I've researched the living
Yeah.
daylights out of this thing and like that I
Yes.
don't know these things? And so it's just not helpful and it's kind of infuriating to be honest. So I know Autumn's got a TED talk for this one.
I do. I really, really, really do. Um, yo, please. Oh, just here's a thought. Ask the person what they want. Do you want me to sit here and just be a listening ear? Do you want me to like affirm what you're saying and like, validate what you're going through? Do you want me to ask you questions to help you maybe like dig a little bit deeper, kind of guide you through where your thoughts are at, where your behavior is coming from? Do you want me to offer some sort of wisdom or counsel within my own realm of knowledge? Not like I'm pretending that I have a PhD in blah, blah, blah out here. Do you want me to offer you some like wisdom or advice that you can take with as you may? And I won't get upset if you don't do it because I am not your therapist and I'm not God. uh, Ask them what they want and then do that. Um, as opposed to just assuming that your advice is wanted because a lot of times it's not. And I just want to clarify this episode has 1000% been very sassy um and a little nippy, and we what Kelsey said at the beginning of the episode is still true now, even if our execution was a little like, that this is genuinely, it's not to shame anyone. Um, we, as you can probably hear, we have just had our own personal experiences of dealing with every single one of these traits in
Yep.
people, in the same person, whatever, over and over and over again. And as people who struggle with mental illness in some capacity in different seasons, we hope you hear our frustration not as a shame to you, but to let you know that it does impact people. And so if you're hearing these and you're like, okay, well, yeah, that's definitely me. I do that. Don't be like, okay, well, Kelsey and Autumn are definitely going to hate me. It's like, interesting. They have had people in their life who have done this thing to them, and it has led to them feeling this type of way. I know that I have a tendency to do this type of thing, but I don't want the people in my life to feel that way when I do that. What can I do to avoid doing this thing? That's the message we're trying to get across. We aren't trying to like, beat anybody with rocks or anything. It's just like mental illness is hard. The
Yeah.
journey of mental wellness is rough and worth it. And if you want to be the person to come alongside someone in their journey, these are just the things that we want you to try to reflect on internally and see what you can do, whether it's by yourself or probably with a therapist, which I would recommend, uh, and see what you can do to let go or work through some of these things that are just unhealthy for you and for the other person.
I think something to reiterate here is that probably the majority of the time when people are acting in these ways that we have listed so far, maybe not always, but probably the majority of the time, people are coming from a good place. They want to be helpful. They are not trying to be vindictive, or they're not trying to make the situation worse. But what we are trying to convey to you right now is that it's not a simple solution.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think that fix it mentality comes from a little bit of a almost like a naive understanding of, well, this must be a simple fix. And I think some of it deep down stems from this makes me uncomfortable because I don't know how to fix this.
Mm.
So in my head, this is a simple fix because that makes it all better quickly, and that's what I want. But unfortunately, that's just not how this works. It's sort of like, if somebody comes to you and they're like, hey man, I have this like pretty complex plumbing problem. My toilet is blowing up and it's leaking in 7 different places. And you're like, well, have you tried duct tape? Because you're like, I don't want to deal with all that actual mess, But the reality is that little duct tape fixes, they're not actually going to help anything.
Yeah.
And the issue is much deeper than that. And that's part of where, the broken leg scenario, at least when you have a broken leg, you have an x-ray. You can look and you say, okay, this is exactly where it is broken. This is exactly where the healing comes from. That's a relatively easy fix. There's no x-ray for your brain, right? And I mean, MRIs, same thing. Like you can't, it's such a complex issue because it's not easy to detect exactly where the problem is all the time.
Yeah.
And even if you can kind of stem where that problem comes from, the solution isn't always easy either. And it's not going to look the same for every single person. Like
Yeah.
every single broken leg is probably going to have a pretty similar solution. You reset it or, whatever. My anxiety and Autumn's anxiety could be treated in completely different ways. And so it is just such a complex problem because it's hard to nail down where the problem comes from. It's hard to nail down what the solution is. And it is a journey. And so while people are coming from a good place because they're like, I just want this person to be well and I want it to be easy. And it's just not. And so sometimes that mentality can be counterproductive to what it is that you're actually wanting for that person. So there are good intentions here. There are good intentions of people want the people in their life to feel better. But what we're telling you and what you, like she said, you can see in the reflection of our reactions to some of this is that some of those ways are just not going to be the help that you want them to be. And so listening to the people in your life and saying, okay, I wish it was this easy, but it's not. So I have to choose the harder way to help those people. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the last thing that I'll add on to that is um, this might rub some people the wrong way, but I think it's necessary. It can be a hard pill to swallow. Um, Impact over intention, right? You could have the best intentions in the world, but the way that it lands, the way that it plays out is just so much more important. It really is. Your intentions, as sweet and as pure as they may be, I beg you to think critically about what you are going to say or do before you say or do it, and ask yourself, actually, not in like the most ideal world, not in the way that I want it to be, but like, actually, how might this play out? Because your intentions don't mean almost anything at the end of the day when it comes to what actually happens. And I think, going along with what Kelsey said, a lot of these do come from a place of good intentions, and that's not like, we want that for sure. I think there's a good amount of these that also come from a place of people have their own things that they need to work through in therapy. And I know
Yep.
that's like, kind of like a running joke that we've had in this episode, but like I'm saying that so genuinely. There were like multiple times, well over half of them, where I'm like, yeah, this person probably does this because of XYZ. And I'm not a therapist. So like I don't know for sure, of course. But like, you know, go to therapy.
Yep. Yep. Moral of the podcast is
Literally.
but yes. So yeah. All right. Well, hopefully there are some helpful and constructive things in this episode with some people. And I guess our problem was we started off with a Mean Girls reference, and so we may have gone with that a little too strongly. But like Autumn said, you can kind of see like the emotional response that is included in this for both of us, and that's because it is pretty serious, and it's uh, there's a lot to reflect from, and we're not here to shame anybody, but we just want to see people come away knowing how to be supportive in a constructive and an empowering way. Because Autumn and I also know the people in our lives that have played that role and how incredibly vitally important it was,
Yeah.
has been in our journey, will continue to be in our journey.
Yeah.
And so because it's such a serious and such an important part of the mental health journey, like we're going to stress things, and we're probably, obviously we're talking a little bit harsher than sometimes we have before, but it's just important. But yes, I love that we thought we were going to do all 22 of these characteristics in one episode, and here we are, like probably like just about 2 hours worth of content here, but here we are.
Here we are.
So that brings us to our reflection question exercise. It's a little bit of both, but the thing for this week, to kind of end on a little bit more of a positive note, is for everybody, whether you're have a mental health struggle or not. Think through the people in your life and think of one or two people in your life that are safe people in your life, people who you feel safe struggling around and who have served some of these support roles. Because the reality is this is it's not just people with mental illness that need supportive people in their lives.
Yes.
And once you have kind of identified those one or two safe people, we want you to take some time this week and to genuinely thank those people for being those safe people in your life, because we all need more encouragement as well. So.
Absolutely. And I think that's the end of that. So thanks for tuning in this week. Remember to find us on social medias. We are on Instagram. You can find us at embrace.mental.health. Follow our account. Send us a DM if you've got some questions or you just want to chat with us. Like and subscribe on YouTube. You can find us there as well. Email us at embracementalhealthnsc@gmail.com. And you can also find us on Facebook. Just look up Embrace Mental Health. Yeah, I think that's about it.
All right. Have a good week, everybody, and we will see you next week.
Bye. Bye.